Hello there, my sleepy fellows. Tonight, we drift into a tale as old as the sea itself, a story born beneath the light of the two trees in a land long lost to mortal sight. It is the story of Galadriel, once a princess of the Noldor, now a keeper of memory and light, a journey through shadow and silver, grief and grace, as we follow the fall and rise of Galadriel, the exiled princess of the Noldor. And while you are here, I would like to request all of you like this tale, subscribe, and hit the bell icon. Please share with your friends so that it reaches many more ears. Your small actions are kind gesture of your support, and it keep me motivated to produce more such stories. Galadriel, a name many of you know, not in the way we will see her now. For this is not the Galadriel of the Ring's final war, nor the Lady of Lothlórien standing tall beneath the golden Malorn trees. No, this is the younger Galadriel, a princess of the Noldor, bright with longing and fierce with hope, standing at the very edge of her fate, a fate shaped not by battles alone, but by choice, exile, and the quiet ache of memory. Long before the Fellowship came to her woods, before she became a wise guardian of light, Galadriel stood beneath the Two Trees of Valinor, a child of starlight and song, whose heart ached for a land she had not yet walked. She crossed into Middle-earth, not in search of peace but in defiance, seeking lands where her own light could shine. But what she found was far more than she expected, a world of beauty and sorrow, wonder and shadow, where her heart would be tested again and again until it became something gentler and wiser. This is the story we follow, not of battles and crowns, but of a heart learning how to bear both light and loss. We will walk beside her across ancient lands, from the shores of Aquilonde to the hidden paths of Doriath, through grief, exile, friendship, and the quiet forging of her own wisdom, until at last she stands as the Lady of Light, not because she claimed it, but because she learned how to carry it. Now, close your eyes if you wish, and let the ancient breeze from Valinor guide us forward. Together, we will follow the footsteps of Galadriel, the exiled princess of the Noldor, and discover the light she carried even through shadow. There are many stories told of Galadriel, some in songs sung beneath golden leaves, others in whispers shared around flickering fires when the stars are high. To most in Middle-earth, she is remembered as the Lady of Light, the keeper of Lothlórien, wise and ethereal, a figure of both beauty and quiet power. But before she became that guardian, she was something far simpler and perhaps far more wondrous. She was a child of the Noldor, born in Valinor, where the light of Lorelin and Telperion bathed the world in gold and silver. Her name then was Artanis, though her mother called her Nerwin, meaning man-maiden, for she was tall and strong of will, with hair that shimmered like sunlight caught in silver threads, a gift from her lineage, touched perhaps by the mingling of the two trees' light. She was a princess, but never content to remain within the soft gardens of her kin. Even as a child, she would wander the edges of Valinor, where the sea met the land, standing alone with her feet in the surf, gazing eastward toward the unknown shores of Middle-earth, longing for something she could not yet name. Gladriel was not born into shadow, but into a world of perfection, a world where grief and loss were only stories, not yet lived experience. But perfection, she found, could smother as easily as it could comfort, and her heart hungered for a land untamed, where beauty was not given freely, but earned through struggle. That hunger would become her first sorrow, for it would lead her to join the exile of the Noldor, leaving Valinor behind to follow her kin into Middle-earth, a journey not of conquest, but of longing. Longing to shape a land of her own, to create something brighter than even the two trees had given. She crossed the grinding ice, her feet bloodied and her heart heavy, but her resolve unbroken, for the light within her had always been her own to carry. Now, many years have passed since that crossing, and the princess who once stood upon the white sands of Valinor is no longer a child of only light, but of shadow and sorrow, wisdom and strength. She has walked through realms that no longer stand, Doriath and Nargothrond, watched the rise and fall of kings, and stood silent beside those she loved as they faded into memory. She has become a weaver of her own fate, carrying light not as a weapon, but as a gift guarded fiercely, for she understands now that true light is born only when shadow has touched it. This is the Galadriel, whose story we follow tonight, not a queen seated upon a throne, but a traveler still, walking quietly beneath ancient stars, seeking the truth of her own heart. The path Galadriel followed through Middle-earth was never a straight road. It twisted like a river through time itself, sometimes gleaming clear beneath sunlight, sometimes lost in the shadows of doubt and memory. Each step she took shaped her, yet the road was not always of her choosing. There were whispers from the west, calling softly to her, even in lands where no sea could be seen. And though her feet walked the earth, her heart always listened for that distant voice, half remembered, half forgotten. It was a quiet evening when her journey shifted. She stood alone beside a slow-moving stream, deep within the woods of Eregion, her hands resting on the smooth bark of a birch tree, her fingers tracing its pale surface, as though the tree itself might offer counsel. The air was cool, and the first stars had begun to bloom, silver and still, like drops of memory spilled across the sky. Galadriel had walked these woods many times before, yet something was different that night. The air itself seemed to hum, as though the earth had drawn breath and now held it, waiting. Even the stream slowed, its surface smooth as glass. A whisper of a song, barely more than a breath, seemed to drift through the trees. Words in Quenya, the ancient tongue of her people, a language she had not heard spoken aloud since Valinor lay behind her. She followed the sound, her feet moving without thought, leaves soft beneath her steps. It led her deeper into the forest, until the trees thinned and the ground rose, forming a gentle hill crowned with standing stones, worn smooth by rain and time. In the center, the earth had split, and from that crack grew a tree unlike any other, its leaves silver as Telperion's light, its bark white as frost, yet warm to the touch. Galadriel knelt beside the tree, her hand resting against its trunk, and as her fingers met the bark, a vision bloomed behind her eyes, not sharp and sudden like a wizard's spell, but soft and slow, like the unfolding of a flower at dawn. She saw Valinor as it had been when she was a child, the light of the two trees washing over wide meadows, her father's voice calling her home, her mother brushing silver combs through her hair. And then the light darkened, the trees fading into shadow, and she saw herself on the ice, her breath clouding before her, her hands red and cracked from the cold. She saw the crown, her crown, shining softly in her hands, a simple band of silver set with a single gem, blue as the deepest sky. But it was not her memory alone. There was another hand in the vision, placing the crown upon her brow, a hand pale and slender, fingers adorned with rings of forgotten kings. The hand belonged not to her kin, but to the earth itself, as though Middle-earth had claimed her crown and held it safe, waiting for her to remember where she had left it. The vision faded, leaving Galadriel kneeling in silence beside the silver tree, her breath slow, her heart steady. The crown was somewhere in this land, hidden not by enemies, but by time itself, buried beneath memory and soil, guarded by the earth that had welcomed her when she first set foot upon its shores. But why now? Why would the land call her back to it after so many long years? The stars above gave no answer, only shimmering softly in their silence. Galadriel did not speak of the vision to anyone, not even to Celeborn, who walked beside her through these lands and whose love had become her anchor in the long years of exile. This was her burden, the silent inheritance of all who had left Valinor behind. It was not sorrow alone, it was the weight of memory, the understanding that to walk in Middle-earth meant to carry all the beauty and grief of the West within you, even when you no longer wished to remember. Yet the vision did not leave her. Each night, as the stars rose, the crown returned to her mind, its silver band gleaming in her thoughts, the sapphire flickering like a lonely star. And so, quietly, Galadriel began to search, not with urgency, nor with the hunger of those who seek power, but with the gentle patience of a gardener who knows that some things grow only when the earth is ready to offer them. She walked the ancient paths, her fingers brushing against stones worn smooth by rain, her ears open for the soft songs that drift between root and leaf, the whispers of the land itself. Sometimes she would find a fragment, a carving half buried in moss, a rune worn nearly to nothing, a song only the wind remembered. Each piece was a thread, and slowly the tapestry took shape, a path leading westward toward the sea, but not the sea itself. The land was remembering her, just as she was remembering it. There were times she wondered if the crown had ever truly existed at all, if it was only a memory shaped by longing, a symbol her heart had crafted to hold all the grief and beauty of her exile in a single shape. But then she would find something, a fallen branch shaped like a slender circlet, or a stone polished smooth, its surface catching the light just so, forming a glimmer like a sapphire beneath the waves. The world was speaking to her, not in words, but in signs, soft and fleeting as breath upon glass. And Galadriel, who had once been a child running across the sands of Valinor, knew how to listen. Her journey took her to places few now remembered. The ruins of Eregion, where the craft of her kin had once flourished, and where now only silence remained. In the heart of those broken halls, beneath arches overgrown with ivy, she found a single inscription, so faint it could only be seen beneath moonlight. To the daughter of twilight, who left the light to find her own. It was no ordinary carving. It was a message left for her alone, placed there long ago by hands that knew she would one day return. And beside the inscription, half buried in the earth, lay a slender silver circlet, tarnished with age, its sapphire still glimmering faintly beneath the soil. Her crown, lost and found, buried not by enemies, but by her own past self, as if to say, you must first walk in darkness before you can truly claim your own light. Galadriel held the crown gently, her fingers tracing its shape, and in that quiet moment, she understood. The crown was not a symbol of rule nor of power. It was a promise made between herself and the land she had chosen. A promise that she would not forget the light of the West, even as she walked beneath the shadows of Middle-earth. It had never been lost. It had only been waiting for her to remember. With the crown in her hands and the stars reflected in her eyes, Galadriel stood once more upon the ancient earth, not as a princess longing for the West, but as the Lady of Light, who had found her own light within the shadows of the world she had chosen. And the land itself seemed to sigh in quiet relief, as though a long-forgotten story had finally found its end. Galadriel stood beneath the starlight, the silver circlet resting in her hands, its slender band cool against her skin. It was a simple crown, unadorned save for the sapphire at its heart, its deep blue reflecting the heavens above. Yet the weight it carried was far heavier than its form suggested, for this was not just a token of her past, but a key to her memory, a doorway into the truth she had long left unspoken. The earth itself had given the crown back to her, and with it came the unraveling of the past, not in sharp visions, but in gentle waves, each memory folding over the next, revealing not only what she had lost, but why she had hidden it away in the first place. Long ago, beneath the light of the two trees, Galadriel had walked the meadows of Valinor with bare feet and unbound hair, the light of Lorelin and Telperion weaving gold and silver into her locks. The air had been sweet then, the land unscarred by grief, and her heart had been unburdened by longing. Yet even then, she had carried a quiet restlessness, a hunger for something beyond perfection, a desire to shape a world of her own making, not to simply inherit beauty, but to create it with her own hands. This restless heart was both her gift and her sorrow, for it made her the boldest of her kin, the one most drawn to the whispered tales of Middle-earth, of wide lands and deep forests, of places where beauty and sorrow walked side by side, where the stars above were unsheltered, seen by eyes that had never stood beneath the trees. It was this longing that led her to the gathering in Tirion, where the sons of Feanor first spoke openly of leaving Valinor, of reclaiming the Silmarils, of stepping into the darkened world beyond the sea. Galadriel had not cared for the Silmarils themselves, nor for vengeance, but the call to create something of her own, to walk a land where beauty was born from struggle, That call stirred within her heart like the sea wind against sails. And so, with her brothers and her kin, she crossed into exile, leaving behind the light of the trees and stepping into the long twilight of Middle-earth, a princess without a kingdom, a weaver without a loom. The crown had been hers from the first step onto those shores, a symbol not of rule, but of the promise she made to herself that she would not simply follow, nor would she take her place beneath any king. She would carve out her own path, guided not by command, but by the light she carried within herself. Yet time, like water, wears down even the sharpest resolve. The long years of the First Age had left scars upon her heart. The fall of Doriath, the betrayals of kin, the slow crumbling of every kingdom the Noldor built. Grief had settled into her bones like frost, and with it came doubt, doubt in the dream that had once burned so brightly within her. The crown became a burden, a reminder not of her strength, but of all that had been lost, until at last she set it aside, burying it within the earth itself, hoping that if she could forget it, she could also forget the longing it represented. But the land remembered. The earth held memory in ways that no mind could ever erase. And so, even as Galadriel walked the woods and rivers of Middle-earth, the earth whispered to her, not in words, but in shapes, in streams that curved like silver bands, in stones that gleamed blue beneath the rain, in the hush that fell when she spoke her own name softly into the wind. Now, with the crown returned to her hands, the memories came too, not as sharp pain, but as a gentle unfolding, the way a wound begins to breathe when it is no longer hidden away. She remembered standing on the shores of Balar, the sea wind tangling her hair, her fingers tracing the edges of the crown before she buried it in the soft earth. She had spoken no words over it, offered no farewell, only a sigh, half longing, half surrender, before walking away. But the earth had not forgotten. The land itself had kept the promise she could no longer bear to hold. As these memories unfolded, Galadriel stood silent beneath the stars, the crown resting lightly in her hands, its sapphire catching the starlight and holding it like a single drop of the two trees' lost light. There was no regret within her heart now, only understanding. She saw herself as she had been, bold, proud, fierce with longing, and she did not curse that younger self, nor did she mourn her. She was a thread in the tapestry, part of the path that had led her here, to this quiet hill beneath the ancient sky. The crown was no longer a symbol of her failure, nor a relic of a dream lost to time. It was a bridge, connecting the child who once walked beneath the trees to the woman who now stood beneath the stars of Middle-earth, a woman who had carried both light and shadow, and who had learned at last that both were needed to truly shine. Galadriel lifted the crown and placed it upon her brow, not with ceremony, but with quiet grace, like a gardener returning a seed to the earth. It was light upon her head, the silver band cool and familiar, the sapphire resting just above her brow, a mirror to the evening sky above. The air shifted, soft and sweet, and Galadriel knew the earth had felt it too, the quiet reconciliation between who she had been and who she had become. She stood there for a long while, the breeze carrying the scent of leaves and distant rain, the stars keeping gentle watch above her. There was no need for words, no audience to witness, only the land, the sky, and the memory between them. The crown was hers once more, not to rule, but to remember, to honor the promise that had shaped her journey, the longing that had made her bold enough to leave paradise in search of something she could call her own. When at last she turned from the silver tree, Galadriel walked not as a queen, nor as a princess longing for lost light, but as herself, a child of both Valinor and Middle-earth, whose light was no longer borrowed, but wholly her own. The path ahead was still shrouded in mist, for her story was not yet over. But now she walked it freely, crown upon her brow, light within her heart, a woman at peace with her own shadow, walking hand in hand with memory itself. The land would remember this night, the stars would remember too, and long after Galadriel herself was gone, the earth would still hum her name softly beneath the trees, telling her story to the roots and rivers, so that no memory was ever truly lost. Galadriel walked softly through the forest, the silver crown now resting upon her brow, like a whisper of starlight woven into her hair. The earth beneath her feet felt different now, not changed, but more alive, as if the land itself recognized her for who she was meant to be, not simply a lady of power, but a daughter of memory, bound to both Middle-earth and Valinor by threads only the earth and sky could see. The air carried no voice, no command, only the gentle hush of leaves brushing against one another and the sigh of the wind weaving through branches overhead. This was not the silence of emptiness, but the silence of stories waiting to be told, ancient memories pressing softly against the edges of the world, longing to be remembered. In the heart of the woods, Galadriel came upon a glade she knew well, a place where the light always seemed softer, as if time itself had forgotten to pass. Here, the forest floor was blanketed in golden leaves, though no tree nearby bore such color. The air shimmered faintly, and the stream that ran through the glade carried not just water, but echoes, fragments of songs and voices from ages long gone, their words blurred by time. It was here that she was met by an old friend, Melion's voice, soft as rain upon leaves, though Melion herself was long gone from these lands. The Maya had been a guide to Galadriel in Doriath, teaching her the ways of Middle-earth's magic, the quiet power that lived not in spells, but in the listening heart, the heart that knew how to hear the earth's voice beneath the noise of mortal life. The voice spoke only a single phrase, "The earth remembers," and then it was gone, leaving only the hush of the stream and the rustling leaves. Galadriel followed the stream westward, its path weaving between trees ancient and twisted, their roots knotted into shapes that held meaning, though no hand had carved them. Along the banks, she found gifts left by time, smooth stones carved with runes worn almost to nothing, feathers from birds no longer seen in these lands, and once the glimmer of mithril buried half in the mud, a token left behind from the days of Eregion. She gathered these as she walked, not as treasure, but as threads, each one part of the tapestry she now carried, each a piece of Middle-earth's quiet song, the song she was learning to hear with every step. Her path led her toward the edges of Eregion, the land once ruled by Celebrimbor, where her own hands had once helped shape rings and runes, though her heart had always been more drawn to the earth's quiet wisdom than the hunger for power. The ruins stood beneath the stars, worn by wind and rain, but still singing softly, not in words, but in the humming silence of memory, the way a harp still vibrates long after the string is plucked. Here she paused, her fingers brushing against the stone, and the earth beneath her feet trembled faintly, not in fear, but in recognition. She was not a queen returning to her realm, but a daughter of the land, welcomed home by the stones themselves. As she stood there, she was not alone for long. Out of the shadows stepped Calanhir, an elf she had known in the days of Doriath, a minstrel once, though now his hair was silvered with age, and his hands bore the marks of long work, tending the forests that had grown wild since Doriath's fall. "You heard it too, didn't you?" he asked, his voice soft, as though he feared speaking too loudly might disturb the memory living in the air. Galadriel nodded, her fingers still resting upon the stone. "The earth remembers, even when we forget." Calanhir smiled faintly, and in his eyes she saw the reflection of the stars, not as they were tonight, but as they had been long ago, when Elu Thingol still walked beneath them. "Come then, lady, there's a story you need to hear, and I've been waiting a long time to tell it." They walked together beneath the trees, their steps slow, the silence between them comfortable as old friends who have no need for words. Calanhir led her to a hidden hollow where the earth sloped gently inward, forming a natural amphitheater, its edges lined with stones carved long before the Noldor ever set foot in these lands. Here he sang, not a song of lament, nor a song of battle, but a song of the earth itself, a song sung in the first days, when the stars were young and the rivers unnamed, when the earth knew no sorrow yet, only wonder. The song spoke of a crown, not of silver or gold, but of living light, shaped from the first gleam of the stars, reflected in dew upon the grass. It was a crown meant not for a king, but for a guardian, one who would walk not above the land, but within it, hearing its voice, tending its wounds, remembering its first beauty, even when the world itself forgot. Galadriel listened, and she knew the crown upon her brow was only a shadow of that first crown, a reflection caught in silver, but its purpose was the same: to remember, to guard, to hold the beauty of the earth gently, even as it changed, even as it broke. When the song ended, they sat together in silence, the stars above gleaming like scattered pearls across the dark sky. Calanhir placed a small stone in her hand, carved with a single rune, the symbol of remembrance, ancient even in Doriath. "No crown endures forever," he said softly, "but memory does, and sometimes that is enough." They parted before dawn, Galadriel walking eastward toward the rising sun, the stone resting in her palm, the crown resting lightly upon her brow, her heart heavy and light at once. She knew now her journey was not to claim power, nor to rebuild a kingdom lost to time. It was to carry memory itself, to walk as a living bridge between Valinor and Middle-earth, between what had been and what still might be. She was not a queen. She was a keeper of stories, a guardian not of treasure, but of the earth's song, the song no one else could hear, save those who knew how to listen. As the sun rose, her shadow stretched long before her, and Galadriel stepped into the light, not with the pride of a princess, but with the quiet strength of one who knows her task is not to shine, but to ensure that the light itself is never forgotten. And so she walked on, through forests and across rivers, through valleys where memories slept, and hills where songs lingered, her footsteps light, her heart steady. Galadriel's steps led her higher, along the winding ridge where ancient trees gave way to open sky, the first glimmers of dawn stretching pale fingers across the horizon. The crown upon her brow rested as lightly as the mist upon the hills, no longer a burden or a reminder of her exile, but something simpler, gentler, a symbol of remembrance, a bond between herself and the land she had chosen to walk, not as queen or ruler, but as a keeper of memory. The whisper that had drawn her westward was no longer distant. It was close now, weaving through the very air she breathed, a soft call from the earth itself, as though the land had waited for her to come home, not to claim it, but to listen to it. She paused atop a hill, crowned with weathered stones, standing like silent sentinels, placed long before the Noldor set foot in these lands. In the center, the earth had cracked open, not from ruin, but from something ancient awakening beneath the soil, as though time itself had stirred to greet her return. And there, cradled within the earth, lay the final memory, a shard of light, not silver or gold, but something softer, gentler, like starlight caught within clear water. Galadriel knelt, her fingers tracing the edges of the stone, and as her hand touched it, the earth remembered aloud. She saw the first age, when the Noldor first crossed into Middle-earth, her own feet stepping onto foreign soil, her heart filled not with fear, but with fierce longing. She saw herself lightning upon this very hill, beneath a sky brighter than memory could hold, her hair catching the light of new stars, her hands still clean of sorrow, her voice still bright with hope, untested. And she saw herself remove the crown from her brow, not out of defeat, nor shame, but from a quiet promise. I will not wear this until I understand what it truly means, she had whispered to the earth beneath her feet. Let me learn first. Let me walk among shadow and sorrow and beauty alike, until I know what it is to truly belong. And so the earth had taken the crown into itself, not lost, not stolen, but kept in trust, like a seed sleeping beneath winter soil, waiting for the hand that would know how to tend it. Now, Galadriel stood upon the same ground, no longer the proud and restless princess, but the Lady of Light, who had learned that true power lay not in dominion, but in understanding, in holding beauty with open hands, allowing it to change, to grow, to even fade, and still to love it. She placed the crown upon her brow again, and for the first time, it did not feel like a memory from Valinor, but something of Middle-earth itself, a crown of root and leaf, of river and stone, belonging not to a throne, but to the land. As the first sunlight crept across the grass, Galadriel heard the voice of the earth, not in words, but in the soft hum beneath her feet, the sigh of leaves turning in the wind, the hush of streams weaving between stones. The land had known her all along, even when she had forgotten herself. It had carried her story, held her memory, not as something sacred, but simply because that is what the earth does. It remembers all who walk upon it, leaving gentle traces, like footprints that never quite fade. She spoke aloud then, her voice soft. I am no queen, I am no ruler of lands. I am a daughter of both the stars and the soil, and I will walk between them, listening to the earth, tending its memory, until my own footsteps fade. This is my vow. This is my crown. The earth sighed softly in answer, a breeze stirring the leaves, the sun gilding the stones with warm gold. Galadriel did not need an omen or a sign. She knew, she had always known. This was the path she had sought from the first step upon these shores. The past had not vanished. Valinor still called to her in the stillness, a gentle longing she would always carry. But it was no longer a wound, nor something to escape. It was simply part of her song, a thread woven into her footsteps. She was not one or the other, not wholly of Valinor, nor wholly of Middle-earth. She was a bridge, a bearer of both light and shadow, of memory and forgetting, of hope and sorrow. This was the true crown, one no silver band could hold, the knowledge that to belong to the world meant to let it pass through you, to cherish its beauty and mourn its loss in equal measure. She stood upon that hill until the sun was high, her shadow long upon the grass, and then, with quiet grace, she turned her feet toward the east. Her path was not finished. There would still be darkness to face, choices to make, and burdens to carry. But now, she carried them not alone, nor in defiance, but with the gentle strength of one who listens, who remembers, who knows that the land itself walks beside her, whispering stories into her steps. She was no longer the restless child of Valinor. She was no longer the exile seeking a crown of her own. She was Gladriel, keeper of memory, bearer of light, not because she claimed it, but because she had earned it through grief and wonder alike. And in the hush of the morning air, the earth seemed to whisper her name back to her, soft as a breath. Galadriel, Nerwin, Artanis, the daughter who remembers. As she walked down from the hill, the crown upon her brow caught the sunlight, and for a moment it was no longer silver or sapphire, but something softer, a shimmer like water beneath starlight, like a memory too gentle to hold in words. And far above, the wind carried her name westward, back toward the shores of Valinor, where perhaps, for a moment, the earth of the west remembered her too, not as a rebel, nor as an exile, but simply as a daughter who had walked the long road home. And so, with her heart quiet and her path clear, Galadriel walked on, not toward a throne, nor toward a crown of power, but toward the quiet work of memory itself, the gentle tending of stories, so that none would be forgotten, not even those too soft for history to hold. This was her gift, this was her vow, and the earth in its own way would walk beside her until the very end. And so, my sleepy fellows, we come to the final steps of this gentle path, a path that began not with the clash of swords or the rising of banners, but with the soft memory of a crown laid aside, and the quiet calling of the earth beneath Galadriel's feet. As the sun drifted lower in the sky, she walked onward, her steps unhurried, her heart no longer heavy with longing. The crown upon her brow was no longer a weight of exile or regret, but simply a part of her, like a star that had settled upon her brow, soft as moonlight, carried lightly like a leaf upon the wind. The world around her was at peace, or as close to peace as Middle-earth ever comes. The sky was wide and clear, painted with the soft gold of a fading afternoon. A breeze stirred the grasses at her feet, carrying the scent of earth and stone, and in that moment, the land itself seemed to exhale, as if relieved that the story had found its voice once more. For the earth remembers, my dear listeners. It always remembers every step taken, every word whispered, every promise kept or broken. The land holds these memories gently, like seeds buried beneath frost, waiting for the warmth of understanding to bring them to bloom. And now, Galadriel had remembered too, not only who she had been, but why her footsteps had led her to this place, to this moment, to this simple peace beneath the open sky. The story of Galadriel's fall and rise is not just a tale of power lost and reclaimed, nor of exile and return. It is a story of learning to listen, to the earth, to memory, to one's own heart. It is the story of understanding that light and shadow walk hand in hand, and that only those who have walked through both can truly bear the light without fear. She had come to Middle-earth as a princess, bright and bold, filled with longing to build a realm of her own, to leave her mark upon this land. But now, she walked not as a queen claiming a throne, but as a keeper of memory, tending stories as a gardener tends flowers, knowing that each bloom will one day fade, and yet still worth the tending. In that understanding, there is no bitterness, no grief, only a gentle kind of love, the love that remembers even what has been lost, holding it softly like a leaf pressed between the pages of a book. Galadriel would carry that love for all her days, through every choice, through every trial yet to come. It would be her strength, her wisdom, and, in time, her gift to the world. The sun dipped low, the sky washed with rose and silver, and Galadriel's shadow stretched long across the grass. Her journey was not over, for no keeper of stories ever truly reaches an end, but she walked forward with quiet certainty, knowing that every step was part of the tale she was learning to tell, not in words, but in the language of footsteps and soft remembering. And so, my dear travelers, we leave her now, walking quietly beneath the sky, the crown shimmering softly upon her brow, not a burden, but a promise fulfilled, a promise to remember, so that the earth would not have to hold these stories alone. Let her footsteps guide you now, as your own eyes grow heavy. Let the soft hush of leaf and stream, the gentle call of the distant sea, carry you toward your own rest. And know that somewhere, beneath these same stars, Galadriel still walks, not as a queen seeking a throne, but as a daughter of both light and earth, whose gift is not to rule, but to remember, and in remembering, to keep the light alive. Close your eyes now, my sleepy fellows. Let the gentle hand of memory guide you into sleep, where stories drift like leaves upon quiet water, waiting to be remembered when the morning comes. And know this, the earth remembers you too, always.